Ah, Missy, Missy, Missy. You know, I'm probably going to title this a spoiler review of the entirety of Series 8, but I'm really going to focus almost entirely on the finale. I may touch on some other stuff as it sort of occurs to me to do so. But let's dig into what I was dying to talk about. Missy, Mistress, the Master. Now, this was the twist that I had talked about. I had spoiled for me because I saw that as a bit of fan theory. Somebody thinking, this is the Master reincarnated because Missy, Mistress, Master. And I read that and thought, well, no, it's not going to be that because that's kind of dumb. And honestly, on paper, it's still kind of dumb. The reason I do think it gets pulled off is the performance. Michelle Gomez, who plays Missy, really is able to grab the parts of John Simm's performance that worked well, but even sort of reaching back to the classic, very arch kind of Master that we got with people like Roger Delgado, who originated the role. She just works really well, and she does feel properly like the Master. It is a new take, besides the obvious physical transformation. She kind of embraced the femininity of the character, but that femininity, in a way, kind of took the edge off a bit of the flamboyance that John Sims had with his first appearance, at the very least, where it didn't work for me so much. But she's sort of adapted that slightly into this sort of feminized flamboyance, which I think works better. It's kind of funny that way, because I mean, we've had a number of jokes over the course of the show, both from fans and even in canon, poking fun at the relationship between the Doctor and the Master and hinting that there's some sort of actual attraction between the Master and the Doctor. That became a little bit more blatant here, but now that we know that Time Lords can swap genders, does the notion of gay or straight even mean anything anymore? No, I don't think so. But it now suddenly made that odd undercurrent, which I think felt most prevalent back when Anthony Ainley was playing the role, but that now is sort of twisted by it being a aspect of femininity, and it just kind of works better. Again, sort of on paper, the idea of gender swapping the Master into a woman, I don't like that idea in concept, but the execution is very good, which I've said that a couple of times over the course of the series. There's a number of episodes and a number of things that they did that on paper, I'm like, that's not gonna work, but there really were no total fall down episodes this entire series. The weakest one was in the Forest of the Night, but even that one was decent. It wasn't bad. But a lot of these episodes just had ideas that if you had told me the pitch of the episode, I would have been, what? Really? I'm talking about episodes like Into the Dalek, Robot of Sherwood, Kill the Moon. These are weird, silly, goofy, in some cases outright dumb ideas, but they make it work to slightly varying degrees, but I mean, again, nothing completely fell down. And Missy very much fits that mold. It's an idea I don't like in concept, but they sold me on it. I'm on board. And most of the questions I would have had about the Master coming back, which we all knew was inevitable anyway, were addressed, and they were addressed in the way that I like. We didn't sit down and have a long conversation about exactly what he did to come back, but we just established the few keys that I needed to have established. Yes, Gallifrey was saved, and every aspect of Gallifrey was saved, which does mean that Rassilon and the Council, who were trying to initiate that whole thing of ripping apart time and turning the Time Lords into beings of consciousness only, they are still alive as well. Now, we may or may not ever see them again, but theoretically they could come back. So that got addressed. The fact that we were seeing Missy across multiple points in time got addressed, and again, just with little tossed off lines. There were just little plugs for what could have been holes, and now they aren't holes. Moffat's quite good at that, I find. And I also like how blatant the Master's just insanity is brought up at a couple of points, just to make the point that if this plan or his goals, hers, I gotta get used to saying that now. If her goals don't make total sense, part of the reason of that may just be she's crazy. And I know for some people that may seem like a cop-out, but honestly, you go back at some of his schemes, even back into the classic era, that's the only thing I can come up with that makes sense some of the time. Sometimes he comes up with really good, really meticulously planned schemes. Other times he comes up with stuff like, wait, why would you ever think that's a good idea or that would work? Or what? I see what you're doing, but what's the end game of that? What are you possibly going to end up with? Well, maybe he doesn't always know. Maybe he's flying by the seat of his pants. Maybe he's just nuts. And Missy, yeah, she's just kind of nuts. She's together enough to be very, very, very dangerous, but a little bit gone too. We did get the wrap-up and conclusion on Clara that I really was desperate for. I said it repeatedly across this series. I am done with Clara. Now, she was much better in this series than she ever was at any point we saw her previously. And I was happy to have her along, but I'm glad they closed out her story and they ended it. Danny Pink really did help develop her as a character, and he himself was really good, and he played very well, and he was paid off very well, too. That said, I've got niggling logistical questions, particularly in regards to how the fact that he died factors into what we saw in Listen with what was very clearly his descendant. And maybe I need to rewatch Listen, but I don't see how we can reconcile him being dead with what we see with that descendant of Danny from the crazy far future and the connection that he's got with Clara. I need to rewatch it to see if I can reconcile that, but right now it feels like a hole. Just about the only hole I can find, to be fair, but it's bugging me slightly. So we brought up Danny, what happened to Danny, which brings us to Cybermen. A pretty nifty idea, the idea that they could now convert the dead. It's an interesting twist, and when I did my spoiler-free talking about Dark Water, that was the reveal that I'd forgotten because we'd seen the Cybermen in promotional material. So I should have remembered that they were coming. Whatever reason, it completely left my head, and I'm so glad that it did, because that moment, because you've been seeing the design, the sort of circle with the smaller circle for however long the episode's been going on, and you've only been seeing one of it, but then those doors close. It's on both sides of the door, and the Cyberman music cue kicks in. That was a wonderful moment. I'm so glad I'd forgotten they were going to be in this episode, because when I saw that, oh, that was good. And it was a pretty good use of the Cybermen as well. The main issue with the Cybermen always seems to be one of motivation. They work pretty well as villains and as monsters and everything else, but you know, they're just so one note in terms of what they're trying to do. Just convert everyone, convert everyone, convert everyone. Not for a purpose, not for a goal. It's just kind of what they do at this point. I suppose in some ways that's an overcorrection to classic era Cybermen, who tended to be a little bit more scheming, especially in their later appearances, but it didn't work. But I sort of liken this that we're not really dealing with pure Cybermen. They're not part of the Cyberiad or whatever we're calling sort of the collective of the Cybermen. They're under the control of Missy, which allows them to function slightly differently. Not just in terms of raising the dead, which is, again, a very cool idea, but also just in terms of it makes them a little bit less predictable. I do have one thing, and this is a nitpick, I will admit this, but it's bothering me that every time they update the Cyberman appearance and they change it however they do, that just becomes the standard and what we always use going forward. I've got a problem with sort of the timeline of this, because when we saw this design, it was in the far future dealing with this heavily upgraded version of the Cybermen who were crazy fast, and like just one of them on a planet, you gotta blow up the whole planet because they can take out everything. Well, this version of Cybermen that we get, they look like those Cybermen that we saw in Nightmare and Silver, but they don't seem to have all the capabilities that those Cybermen have. I mean, they've got some new ones. They've got the flight and everything, and that's fine, that's cool. And we don't have to worry about that getting carried over, because like I said before, these seem to be sort of isolated Cybermen. But I kind of wish that we could have more distinct appearing Cybermen for whatever part of their actual timeline things fall into. Because and this goes back to the old show too, every time they update the look, that just became the Cybermen. And yes, it's consistent with the idea that they're constantly upgrading, but we're not always seeing them in chronological order, their chronological order. I don't know, maybe I'm overanalyzing that too much, but it's a nitpick. It bugs me a little bit. Last episode also had some really good use of recurring characters, because we had the return of Kate Stewart, who I loved before. We also had Osgood, who I was really, really sorry to see get killed. I didn't like it when it happened, but I also, even like just within about 10 seconds after it happened, I was kind of like, no, but it sunk in why it had to happen. The Master had to kill her because Missy was a lot of fun, and you can't just have the Master be too much fun, because then you run the risk of the Master kind of becoming like Loki in the Marvel movies, where he's so much fun you can't ever just get rid of him. You can't kill him off. Now I'll sort of get to the killing off of the Master in a second. I'll come back to that, but my point is they sort of become a weird sort of middle, not quite hero, not quite villain thing if they're too much fun. And by having Missy kill Osgood, who was a very likable character, and one who just seeing her show up again, especially with the bow tie, just instantly made me smile, and I've always liked her. That immediately just rings the bell of, this woman is dangerous. It had to make it clear, just because the Master swap genders does not mean that Missy is a watered down or less dangerous version. So I absolutely understand the reason why Osgood had to get killed. I was still sorry to see it happen though. As for Kate, when I thought they killed her, because I actually honestly did when she got sucked out of that plane, and because I figured if the Doctor doesn't like materialize the TARDIS around her in mid-fall or something, then she's dead. And I really thought they killed her. That one really bothered me. But then when we get to the end, and she's not dead, and the reason why this, I teared up. I did. I got the lump in my throat. Just the nod to it being her father, and then also this classic character who was just an awesome character. I mean, and he had gotten a really nice sort of post-death send-off in series 6, but now just this extra nugget. It was beautiful. It really was. It was touching, and it was beautiful, and it was perfect. But since I bring up that one straggling Cyberman, they also have to bring up that it appeared to kill Missy. Now, I'm calling it right now that is not what happened. Couple reasons. Well, actually, only one reason. It's the appearance of the disintegration. Blasted with a Cyberman gun. Cyberman guns have never disintegrated. We've never seen that be the case. Now, granted, we did not see these particular version of the Cybermen shoot anyone else that I can think of in that episode. So, I suppose it's possible that the guns did have but we've never ever in this series have Cybermen been the disintegrating types. It just doesn't fit their MO because they want the body. Especially these versions of the Cybermen, if they can convert the dead, why would they disintegrate? That leaves them with nothing to work with. So initial thought is just she used the shot from that Cyberman as cover to teleport. I mean, that's my call for how it's gonna be. She's not dead. She can't be dead. I am also really glad that they didn't have the Doctor find out where Gallifrey was. And I like that they're going to tease that out for a while, because I got really worried when the Master gave coordinates and then the Doctor said he went there and found it. Obviously, you know, we then got the flash and found out that he was lying to Clara about it. But initially I was like, oh no, this soon? Because this has happened a couple times in the show. The most recent time was when the Daleks had their memory of the Doctor wiped, and then like a year later they know who he is completely and it's back to things as they were. I understand the status quo will get reestablished eventually, but I want to see the journey take longer. And in the case of this, I've got very mixed feelings about him ever finding Gallifrey again, so I kind of like the ongoing chase and that it's now a quest for him. I do kind of hope that next series at least that it's not like his overriding mission. I kind of hope that Missy misdirecting the Doctor and just the pain that you saw from him that he didn't find Gallifrey sort of took the wind out of his sails for a little bit, and he's not going to be actively pursuing Gallifrey all through next series. I want to see him sort of bounce around a little bit, and I want to see him bounce around untethered. Even though, as I've said, Clara worked much better this series than she has before, I didn't like that the Doctor kept getting tethered back to Earth and her all the time. I want to see him just go out there and travel and just do that with whoever his new companion is, which I am really ready for, either a male companion or someone who's not human or someone who's at least not from Earth and not from the current time era. Just please shake it up. I'm done with young, attractive girls from the modern era. I'm done. But it was maybe the one criticism that I would level to this series as a whole, which was that it did, in hindsight, feel rather tethered to Earth and tethered to Clara. Now, I kind of like the dynamic that she's not traveling with him all the time and he's just going off, doing his own thing and just coming back for her occasionally. I like that concept and I like that dynamic, but because we're not spending time with him while he's off doing his own thing and we're only touching base when he's coming back and getting her, it does sort of feel a little bit like she's yanking on his leash a little bit, which is exactly what Missy said. So I suppose the fact that it worked that way plays into how things worked out quite well, and it all makes sense, but it's still, to my personal preference, about the one overall thing to the series that I'm like, eh. But really, this was a stellar series. It was so well written, it was so well constructed. Peter Capaldi was great. Clara was as good as she ever got. There wasn't a single episode that I would call a throwaway. I'm just really pumped and really stoked to see what comes in the future, and I just hope that Capaldi feels a bit more front and center. And again, dealing with the overall, especially what happens in the finale, I get, him being tethered to Clara and her sort of almost sharing equal billing, because when she has her thing at the start of this last episode where she says, I'm the Doctor. Now, anyone who's paying attention should know in the audience, well, no, she's not. But the fact that she has the confidence to say that, it's not just a bluff. She has been filling his shoes a couple of times in a number of episodes in this series. So it all built and played out very well. So she kind of needed to have that sort of equal billing with him. I'm kind of ready for a companion who's just gonna hang back and ask the occasional question, occasionally ask just the right question to kick off the Doctor's idea, but who isn't going to try and wrestle control from him the way I felt Clara did sometimes. I mean, I'm not saying I want a spineless companion, but I want the Doctor to be more than 50% of the show. I want him at least 60, 70 is my preference, but this series he felt about 50% of the series. Which again, not really a complaint, but an observation and not what I want to become the norm going forward. So I think this wraps it up. We'll be back in December with Nick Frost playing Santa Claus, and I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out. You know, there was a part of me that would have been really skeptical about the idea of Santa Claus just turning up, but given that this whole series was littered with stuff like that, I would have thought that's a lousy idea, but they pulled it off, and in some cases brilliantly. I'm on board. I want to see what happens. So I guess that about wraps this up. I do have some additional thoughts and sort of the implications of what Missy is and what happened there, but I think that's going to be a separate video after I've sort of had a little more time to digest all of this, but I'm going to be coming back to that. You'll see. But what about you? How did Missy work for you? Did you buy it? Did you enjoy it? Was it fun? Did you think it was the worst idea the show has ever had? Whatever it is you think, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Until next time, this council is adjourned.